Um,
It is
well,
posted.
when they click that link,
You may have to reply in the chat.
yeah, no, I did. I said yes.
Okay.
Um, um, well, Michael, Michael, can you hear me, Michael?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, we're live on YouTube right now.
Okay, so the answer to that question was yes, so we were correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Thank you.
Okay, fantastic.
Welcome,
So as we
Derek,
begin
how are you?
today, we're about to begin now. Thank you so much. My name is Christopher Johnson. I'm from the Kitchener-Waterloo Seventh-day Adventist Church. And at this time, I wish to welcome all these pleasant viewers who are with us today. And also, today's May 24th, 2020. Can you imagine that? This session will go from 5 p.m. till 7 p.m. And before we begin, let me just go through a quick disclaimer. This forum is solely a platform for the exchange of ideas and information on financial and other key issues relative to the COVID-19 pandemic. Information shared by the panelists are personal opinions and may not present the official stand of the Seventh-day Adventist Church regarding financial matters being discussed. Listeners are advised to consult professional help, such as lawyers, consultants, investment counselors, mortgage specialists, relative to the particular case before you take any financial decisions. At this time, I'll turn it over to Pastor Rui, who will do an introduction of the moderators.
All right, thank you, Pastor Chris, and I'd like to welcome all of you to our live forum, Transitioning and Recalculating in Crisis. So with us, we have some presenters with us who we would like to welcome, and I'd like to start with Russell Preddy, Mr. Russell Preddy. He is a he is in family unemployment law in the Kitchener and Waterloo area. Chris?
Yes, and we also have with us today precious brother Derek Sloan, MP for the riding of Hastings, Lennox, and Addington in the House of Commons, running for the leadership of the federal PC party. Thank you so much for being with us today, brother Derek Sloan.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. We also have with us Mr. Raymond McDonald. Goes by Scott. And I would like to add that he's a technology executive for large global organizations, primarily in the banking, retail, and high-tech, having led very large teams of IT professionals. And I would like to add also that he added to his bio also that he has had a couple of family members that have succumbed to COVID. So our condolences to your family, Mr. McDonald.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, as you know, my wife's sister and mother both died on Easter weekend from COVID-19. Yeah.
Wow.
Been rough.
Yes.
If I heard you clearly, Mr. McDonald, did you say you had a death in your family?
Two. So my wife's sister and her mother and their mother passed away. So the sister died on Easter Friday and the mother died on Easter Monday. Many people know the Chin family in Toronto. So that's Doris Chin from Jamaica. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know,
and her daughter Diane.
Please accept my condolences, and I'll include your family in my prayers right after the introduction of the panelists.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, of course. Introducing also Richard Joseph Richards. He's a workplace and employment law, and he practices in the Kitchener-Waterloo area. Joseph Richards, are you with us?
He actually I just received an email from him. I don't know if Michael has seen it, but he says he was deleted from the meeting and cannot rejoin. So Michael, maybe we can look into that and see how he will be able to rejoin us.
Of
Yeah,
course.
no problem. Let me look into that.
Okay. So our next presenter is Pastor Jerry Pasekatan. He works for the Ontario Conference, and his responsibilities there, he is the director of Stewardship Ministries, CVIF, which I think you might have to explain that acronym there, and Kingdom Builders. Welcome.
Thank you. The BIF stands for Church Building Investment Fund.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's good to see everyone this afternoon.
All right. I think
Yes.
we've done all the introduction.
Well, no, Doug Goodman.
Oh, Mr. Doug Goodman.
Yes. At this time, Doug Goodman, are you there with us? Doug Goodman, accountant from the Hamilton area, and he's currently retired, and he will be joining us shortly. So that's our brother Doug Goodman. All right, so at this time, why won't we pause for a moment of prayer, and also wish to include our precious brother Raymond McDonald, his precious family. Let us pray as we begin. Precious God of heaven, we first want to thank you so much for this precious gift of life. The conditions are not always favorable, but nevertheless, it's a gift that has hope through Christ, that one day these crises and these discomforting situations will pass. So we praise you for hope through Christ and the gift of life. We also praise you for the opportunity to meet in this platform to discuss matters that affect all persons on this planet at this time from a financial perspective. We ask that the information will be used properly to benefit those who are affected and also those who are infected. I pray blessings upon the panelists and also those who work behind the scenes to make this possible. I also pray a blessing upon those who are viewing. And last but by no means least, but the most, our precious brother here, Brother McDonald, who has lost his family, some family members during these tough crises by the COVID-19. We ask, mighty God, that you'll comfort his family in a precious way. We ask, Father, that you will surround them with your angels and fill their minds, oh Father, with your Holy Spirit of peace. May every thought, oh God, be comforted by you in this hour. I pray that you'll work out all the funeral details with your mighty hands, and may each family member feel as though you yourself came and officiated this funeral service, and comfort them beyond the funeral service until they see your face in glory, where life and earth will have transformed to life eternal, when the dead in Christ will be brought back to life first, and we who are alive and remain will be caught up together. For one day there will be no more COVID-19, no more sadness, sickness, or pain. And for this reason, we submit our lives to you today, that you will lead us towards that eternal hope through Christ Jesus. This is my prayer. In the marvelous name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
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 Amen. So the primary purpose, I've gone through the disclaimer already, and the purpose for this meeting is to share pertinent financial information, programs, or services that will be offered through government resources. Also to share opinions about other financial matters to help the listeners or viewers make wise financial decisions. To answer questions sent by church members who are viewing. Also to help and encourage each person becoming a better steward of God's gifts and blessings. To pray for God's guidance regarding financial matters, protection for our frontliners, and also healing for those infected and those who are affected by this virus. At this time, we will move to round one of our questions, and I believe Pastor Rui will start off for us.
All right, I just want to just a reminder that as each question is asked, we try to manage our time well. And so we'll give you about 3 to 5 minutes, 5 minutes max, between 3 to 5 minutes to answer each question. And as each question comes, we have the chat open here, and as each question comes, we will ask it to you once we go through the different rounds of questions. So we're actually going to start the first round of questions, and this question will be for our MP, Derek Sloan, and it's a business question. And the question, it's actually a two-part question. And so the first part is, I'm a small business owner. Am I eligible for relief assistance from the government? And the second part is, what are the criteria and how should I go about it?
We just have to get there. Okay, there we go.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I was muted. So that's a really good question. So some small business owners are eligible for the CERB, which is the main benefit that most employed people have been accessing. So if as a small business owner, you have been paying yourself a salary, then you can be eligible for the CERB. So that's the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, which can give you up to $2,000 a month for 4 months. In addition to that, as a small business owner, you can apply for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, which can provide you with up to 75% of wages, and your payroll has to be at a particular level to apply for that. So you can check online to see if you meet the criteria. There's also a CEBA, which is Canadian Emergency Business Account, which can offer a $40,000 loan through, it's mediated through the bank. So you can go through your usual lender, and payments on this loan will be deferred until the year 2022. So this program is going to be expanded to include sole proprietors, dividend earners, and business owners who employ contractors but don't have employees on the books. So basically everybody, although there are certain limits in terms of revenues and so on, but it's relatively wide open. There's also, if you look in the county or the municipality that you're in, there's usually, so in my county, there's a Community Futures Development Corporation. There should be one in your county as well. And some of the loans are going through the Community Futures Development Corporation. So you can check and see if there's local loans going through your Community Futures Development Corporation. There is also a commercial emergency rent assistance program that can lower your commercial rent by up to 75% for businesses that are affected by the COVID-19 situation. There's also a business credit availability program that also has some money for support. So I know I've listed a lot of things there, but you should apply for the CERB if you're eligible. And you can just, if you could just Google eligibility for CERB, you can determine if you're eligible. If you have employees that you want to keep on the payroll, there's the emergency wage subsidy. And then there's the Canadian Emergency Business Account, which is a business loan, part of which is repayable, part of which will be given to you as a grant. So that's sort of in a nutshell what's available for small business owners. And if there's anything that I've said here that strikes your attention, just write it down and Google it, and you can find out some more information on it.
All right. Okay, thank you. Next question, Chris.
Very good. All right, that was very thorough. Thank you so much. And can you just repeat, you said something CEB, what was that acronym there?
Yeah, so I'll give you some of the acronyms, and I'm sorry that I'm giving you so much information here, but if you write down the acronyms, you can look them up. So the main one, the main sort of employment, or the main employment insurance, so to speak, is CERB. The small business loan is CEBA. And then there is, well, there's the Emergency Rent Assistance Program. So I guess CECRA, but people don't necessarily use an acronym when they're talking about that. So those are the main programs, and you can Google them to find out more.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so very much for clarifying that, my precious brother, Derek Sloan.
Thank you.
And now transitioning to Elder Russell Preddy. He's first elder at the Kitchener-Waterloo Church, and he has expertise in family and employment law in the Kitchener-Waterloo area. His question has 3 parts. I'll go with part 1 first, or if he has it memorized, he could just go through answering the entire question. The question reads, what kind of leave can I take if I am government assistant, what kind of leave can I take if I am quarantined or forced to self-isolate? Will I be paid if I'm told to stay at home? Do I qualify for any government assistance or benefits during my time of quarantine?
Well, thank you very much, Pastor Chris and Pastor Rui, for the invitation and for such a loaded question. It's my privilege to speak today, and I want to see what I can do in my 5 minutes. First of all, I'd like to find out, if someone brought that question to me, are they part of a bargaining unit? Because if they are part of a bargaining unit, they would need to be able to see what's provided in that bargaining agreement that may help them with their time off. They may also have an employment contract that will state, for example, sick leave. They might also have a provision where they can bank days. So before they decide to stay home, I would suggest that they check with their bargaining unit, look at their employment contract, see if they have banked holidays. And another thing is that in terms of the place of employment, I would caution people not to, on their own, decide it's not safe, because safety could be in the mind of the person who is a bit worried about it. So there may be provisions for safety that your employer provides that you should look at before you decide it's not good to go into work. Now, in terms of leave, there isn't a provision for leave directly. So if you decide just to stop on your own, stop going to work, you may be at risk, because you may have, the employer might decide that you have just decided not to come to work for any other reason. So you must look at these documents to see if in fact you're entitled to any time off. Now, once you say, can I take leave? If you're forced to isolate. Now, when you say forced to isolate, it's another question I have to look at. Who forced who to isolate? You know, is it you forced yourself? Did your employer force you? Is it a government restriction? So there's all these things to consider before you decide, forced to isolate. If it's your own idea that you want to isolate, that might be risky, again, because you've made the decision without sufficient information. If your employer says that you should isolate, they might decide to pay you for that because they're making that initiative. So now, if you're staying at home, your employer might decide to pay you if you're home. But if you're not, as we heard before, the CERB is a program you could apply to if you cannot work because of COVID. So that application takes 5 minutes on the telephone. You have to have with you, when you do that, if you're an individual, you want to take your T1 general, which is your last tax return, because the questions they will ask you for qualification will be on, the answers will be on your T1 tax return. They'll ask you for line 150 or line 119, but they will ask you for information to verify who you are. It takes about 5 minutes. If you're running a business, they'll ask you either for a T4 summary or a T2125 if you're a sole proprietor, which means these are your business numbers. They want to know who you are and how well you're doing. This benefit applies to people who are employed or self-employed. And as we heard before, you get $2,000 a month for 4 months. Now, my caution is not to think as that is free money, because lo and behold, there'll become a day of reckoning with those funds. So, what will happen if you don't go out and car shop because you now have 4 months of $2,000 apiece? Because I am pretty confident that at the end of this, there may be a post-COVID, post-pandemic audit. And what may happen is that you now required to account for the money you've taken. It may be taxed based on your income level. And if it's taken without good reason, there might be another situation to handle that might be unpleasant. But more than that, it is not free money. It's a lot and it seems good, but it's not free money. Now, when you apply, you can apply to the CRA or to Service Canada, but not both. And if you do, they will compare records. So just be careful. Do it at the appropriate time for the appropriate reason. Now, the criteria is that you're not working because you have COVID, right? Also that your EI is exhausted. And there's also a questionnaire online you can fill out to tell you if you qualify or not. It's on the Government of Canada website. So let me sum this up. If you're going to apply for this, make sure that you are not currently receiving EI benefits, because they're not concurrent. They're sequential. You do not quit your job voluntarily. You can't decide to say, well, I only make $1,500 a month at work. I'll quit and I'll make $2,000 with the COVID relief. That's not exactly wise, because they're going to do a post audit somehow. You also have to have made at least $5,000 in the last 12 months to be able to be eligible for that. And your work has stopped because of COVID. So basically, and also in the last 2 weeks, you have to make less than $1,000. So there's some things that you can look at on screen with the Government of Canada website that will guide you through these things. And what we're giving today is just information and not advice before you look at something else. Hopefully that covers most of the question.
I believe you did, and thank you so very much. And if you've just recently logged in, you have joined the online forum, Transitioning and Recalculating in Crisis. And we have a wonderful set of panelists who will be responding to questions. And as Elder Preddy reiterated the disclaimer, the information shared by the panelists are personal opinions and may not represent official stand of the Seventh-day Adventist Church on financial matters. Also, listeners are advised to consult professional help, whether it be a lawyer, accountant, investment counselor, mortgage specialist, to assist you in making important financial decisions. So we just wanted to reach out to you to help you and point you towards some great directions that might help you during these tough times. Pastor Rui, did you have a question there for the next panelist?
Yes, our next question is for Mr. Ray McDonald, Scott. And the question is, how do I budget and manage my debts in this time of crisis?
Yeah, thanks, Pastor. And I'm glad that disclaimer was read again before I speak. Thank you very much.
That's great. Yeah, you covered, my precious brother.
As you guys can see behind me here, I'm a member of Hamilton Mountain. I'll just change the camera view so you can see that better.
Fantastic.
Okay, so when I was really glad at the content of this question because it has two keywords. It said, hey, how do I budget and manage my debts at this time of crisis? So I'm going to spend a little more time on the word manage than I am on the word budget. Because this is a time of crisis. So a lot of people stay for a while, and then when there's problematic times, they don't want to touch their savings. But this is actually a time when we may need to, but it's good to have a reason that we fully understand so that we don't have any surprises. So to avoid surprises, I'm going to suggest that doing a cash flow plan is even more important than doing a budget, and I'll talk about that just briefly for a couple minutes, and then I'll let Russell correct my errors when I get to the end. So, correct my advice anyways, right? So yeah, thanks, Russell. So a lot of people work out a budget, right? So they take 12 months and they think, okay, I'm gonna work out this budget, and they spend a lot of time, some spend a lot of time on the details. And then next thing they know, they're way off track from their budget, or they've run into issues, things like that. And so I think what's more important under our topic today, which is COVID-19, which is to focus on a cash flow analysis. So that's what I would start with, and I would work towards a budget after that. So what do I mean by cash flow, and how do we analyze that? So I'm sorry, I'm looking through some notes I made here just to be sure I'm staying on track and stay within my 5 minutes. Folks who know me well know I can go on for a while. So when I'm talking about cash flow, I mean, pick a period of time. Some might even need to do that as days or weeks, but I'm thinking more something like 3 months, 3 to 6 months we want to take and work out a cash flow. And so I want to also cover things that aren't just mathematical, right? So this is the best thing we can do for a healthy mind, because working out cash flow helps us to avoid surprises. and we really don't like nasty surprises. So we might know there's unpleasant things coming. That allows us to manage towards them versus being hit with a surprise that we didn't see coming. So avoiding surprises goes a long way to having peace of mind in a difficult situation. So working on short-term cash flow situations helps us also avoid, I'd say, distractions from wishful thinking. Because usually when you're doing a budget, you're thinking, oh, 9 months to a year from now, I want to do this. And you start putting these financial things into your budget. So working on a short-term cash flow, we avoid distractions of wishful thinking, and it focuses on short-term realities so we can get tactical. And that's what I'm going to talk about for my last few minutes. So let me just take a moment to scroll down here. One thing I do is I teach a course at Sheridan College part-time that's called Customer Service Skills for IT Professionals. And we take people through working in Tuckman teamwork models. We take them through time prioritization. So a lot of you folks might know the Covey principle, the Covey quadrants. If you guys have done that, if you haven't done that, look it up. It's COVEY. So you would call that Covey time management. And they have 4 quadrants. So we'll teach them to take all the things you have to do and write them down, and then break them down into the 4 quadrants that you'll see when you look that up. And the most important quadrant is the one called it's urgent and it's important. Because we will spend a lot of times on things that are urgent, but they're not important. So there's a clue for another one of your quadrants. So I want to take that and apply it to our cash flow analysis. So the way I would suggest doing that when we start planning was we take the 4 abilities and we start with the must-dos, which are 2 kind of categories. So we're going to take the must-do within your selected time. So if my cash flow analysis is 3 months, I'm going to take the must-do within 3 months. And these are things that you either have legal requirements or you're going to have financial penalties for not doing them. So those are the urgent and most important things. So you're going to list those. Then you're going to list things that are actually really quite important to you, but they're not urgent. And you're going to categorize those. You're going to list other things that you'll put down. Sorry, it's terrible. I usually speak without notes, so it helps me a lot. But when I put notes, it throws me off. So you want to do prioritization of these things. So the other one you want to do is start listing things that are important but not urgent. You want to list things that are urgent but not important. And you want to list things that are neither. They're not important and they're not urgent. So you want to get down those 4 things. And then, of course, you now have your list. You're going to work. Pretty much it's the old 80-20 rule. You guys have heard that, right? 20% of what you do gives you 80% of your results. And we usually use that analogy so we can say to people 80% of what you're spending your time on isn't buying you very much. So if you can use a Covey principle and prioritize your time better, you can get much more payback on where you focus your time. So same with the cash flow analysis. Focus your time. Now, we start working ourselves, we start shortening up the list. So we start looking at all our cash capabilities. So what savings do we have? What very liquid cash do we have? What's my income going to be for those 90 days? Because we're only focusing on the 90 days. So what is my cash flow? What savings do I have? I can even look at a reminder of what's in my retirement plans and RSPs. We'll talk about a lot of cautions around that later, but sure enough, that's still something that's there. And then we'll get down our list. There's a question coming for me later where we'll talk about what to do when the cash runs out. But we start working on cash flow priorities and we start working down our list. So you're obviously going to start cutting off all the less important stuff. And you're going to get down. Now, if you end up with, you don't have as much cash as you have of quadrant 1, must do it, and it's urgent, which means you have it time bound within the 90 days, then you have to start making some tougher decisions, right? But with the cash flow analysis and you spend time on that, you get a peace of mind once it's settled that you have a good understanding of the next 90 days, whether that's positive or a difficult reaction, you know. And I'd say that that's much more important than doing some kind of budget for the next 12 months. Once you have the cash flow done and you have your strategies for the next 90 days, then you work on the full budget thing, because now you've known what your most reoccurring expenses are over the next 90 days, and you're able to start planning that out over a year. So you'll be surprised at what you spend your money on without even thinking about it. in our area, do you really need cable or Bell Fibe for all your TV channels when an antenna gets you 30 to 40 channels in our area where we live? Just questions like that. So I won't take more time because I have another question coming up on what if I'm not earning enough money. So I'll be much more specific. But in this case, I just highly recommend you spend time on cash flow analysis, pick 90 days or even 6 months, and leave the budget work for another day once you know how you're getting through this current crisis.
Very good. And I think we still is you again, Pastor Rui, with Mr. Doug Goodman.
Next question actually would be for, it seems that Mr. Richards has joined us. And maybe we want to ask him the next question before we go to Mr. Goodman. Mr. Goodman, we're trying to get a hold of him, but we haven't been able to do that yet.
Okay.
So,
Well, we did strike that question from the records because it's more tailored towards the expertise of Elder Preddy. So the question I have now then for Pastor Jerry Pasikatan, it has to do with financial stewardship. The question is returning my tithes and giving offerings online biblically acceptable?
Thank you, Pastor Chris. I hope my voice is clear and it's being heard. Good. Good afternoon, everyone. And that's an interesting question that you have just shared, Pastor Chris. The Bible or the scriptures addresses the topic of giving, but not online giving. I need to be honest on that, right? There is no particular passage or verse in the entire Bible that talks about online giving. The Bible was written thousands of years before online giving was even an idea. Could God have inspired the biblical writers to foresee the giving via the internet? Of course, but he didn't. The Bible addresses and teaches about giving, but not online giving. The Bible is silent on the topic of online giving. And that's why I believe why some people have all the right to raise a good question about online giving, and many are simply sincere in knowing the answer while a few oppose it. They might say if it's not in the Bible, it's unbiblical. Online giving isn't in the Bible, so we shouldn't use it. But my response to all our friends and to the person who raised the question is very simple. There's nothing in the Bible about tithe and offering plates or ushers, but we use those in churches all over the world. There's nothing in the Bible about cars and cell phones or Zoom, but we're using them. The Bible never advocates the use of electricity, airplanes, buses, name it, trains, or even the printing press. So why do so many people and even churches use these unbiblical tools? The Bible is silent on far more topics than it addresses. It is silent on neckties and bow ties, electric razors, what else? Deodorant, computers, spatulas, vitamins, and even pizzas and tacos. Should all those things then be forbidden? Of course not. And to answer the question about the biblical nature of online giving, we must look at the principles of giving found in the Bible, I fully believe. And let me just quickly share three of those biblical principles. Number one, our giving should be to God first, all right? Proverbs, for example, chapter 3, verses 9 to 10 says so. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. The second principle is our giving should be with joy, right? With joy. Each man, according to the scriptures in 2 Corinthians 9:7, for example, says, each man should give what he has decided in his heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Everybody knows that. And then third principle of giving in the scriptures is our giving should be in loving obedience to God's teaching and command, right? Like that, for example, that we all know so well in Malachi chapter 3, verse 10. It says, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse that there may be food in my house. And God said, test me on this, says the Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgate of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you will not have room enough for it. And Jesus even said in the New Testament, you should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former, referring to the giving, of course, Matthew 23:23. Now, the whole point is this. Now, consider online giving with all those three biblical principles of giving. Can someone give to their church through the internet or in a digital way or online way and effectively live out those three biblical principles that I have just said? The answer is yes, absolutely. One can give to God first online, one can give joyfully online, and one can give online again in loving obedience to God's teaching and command, all online. Thus, we say it can simply be stated that giving online is not unbiblical. In fact, that should be the question to be asked. Instead of, is giving my tithes and offerings online biblically acceptable? We should ask, is it unbiblical to give my tithes and offerings online? Now, not everything can be proven biblical, but it is clear what can be proven unbiblical. The promise of God is, give and you will receive. Your gift will return to you in full, pressed down, shaken together to make room for more, running over and poured into your lap. The amount you give will determine the amount you get back. We know that from Jesus' words in Luke 6:38. So may this be the experience of the one who shared the question and the rest of our listeners as you continue to faithfully return God's tithe and give free will offerings to God. Yes, even online. God bless you. Thank you.
Amen. Well said. Thank you so very much. And clearly it shows that God does work through cultures as he worked with Israel through different cultures and stages. Once they were slaves in Egypt, then they had their own lands. And then Jesus reiterated that it's also wise to give unto Caesar what is Caesar. So he works through different cultures, and we are in a cultural state today where we have trains, airplanes, and technology, like you said, Pastor Jerry. And the end result is, are my efforts glorifying God? Amen.
Pastor Chris, before we end this first round,
So
Mr. Joseph Richards has joined us. You might want to ask question 4 that is set out for him, so we don't leave him out.
right. So that was the only question in round 1 for Joseph Richards. That was the only question for Joseph Richards in round 1. So we'll pick up Joseph Richards again as we move forward. So I believe it's you again, Pastor Rui.
Okay. All right. So that was the end of our first round, of course. And just as a reminder, in terms of sponsorship of this online forum is, of course, a joint undertaking by the Southern Ontario Ministerium and the Stewardship Ministries of the Ontario Conference, of course, with the participation of each panelist with us here from the various Adventist churches in the Southern Ontario region. So our next question, with the same principles of 3 to 5 minutes, is going to our MP, Derek Sloan. And it's in regards to family assistance. And the question is, what government financial assistance programs can be availed by families during the COVID-19 crisis?
So so that's a good question. So obviously, the assistance available to families overlaps with the assistance that's available to workers and small business owners. So if you're a small business owner or a business owner, my last answer covers that. So for normal employees, obviously there's the CERB, which provides a taxable benefit of $2,000 a month for up to 4 months for Canadians who have lost work due to COVID-19. There's a few other criteria for that one as well. The filing date for tax returns has been delayed to June 1st. So that's gives you a few more months to get your house in order, so to speak. There is a one-time increase to the regular May Canada Child Benefit. And so for those who get the child benefit, you would have already received this payment for this month. And you should have received an extra $300 per child. There have been changes to the Employment Standards Code that allow employees 14 days of job protected leave in order to self-isolate or to care for a child. And there have been temporary salary top-ups for low-income essential workers. And Canadian banks will also be allowing homeowners to defer their mortgage payments for 6 months. You will have to, pledge that you're unable to make the payments and so on. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend deferring it if you don't have to, because the interest, of course, keeps ticking on. But that is an option if you need to take advantage of it. I'll also mention the only sort of program specifically centered at families is this one-time increase in the child benefit. But I'll mention as well seniors, because seniors are part of families. Any senior eligible for the old age security pension can expect to receive a one-time non-taxable payment of $300, and any senior eligible for the GIS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, will receive a further $200. And the government has also reduced the required minimum withdrawals from registered retirement income funds, or RIFs, by 25% for this year. And also there's 9 million in funds that will be dispersed through United Way to local organizations that are providing practical assistance to families and seniors. So that's pretty much it. There's not a lot of outright funds outside of the worker, CERB and other benefits, but that gives you an idea of what some other things that are available.
All right, actually, thank you for that information. Actually, just looking at my list, I took Pastor Chris' questions. So the next two questions are yours.
No, go right ahead, Pastor Rui. We are a family. Go for it.
I guess family, family. All right, I'll ask the next question, and so that way we can stay on track here. And it is for dear brother Russell Preddy, and the question is: COVID-19 crisis has deeply affected my finances, and I tried to make both ends meet. I lost my job. Being unable to pay my apartment rent for a month now, I fear for eviction. What do I do? Can apartment renters be evicted during the pandemic, and how can I avoid that eviction?
Can you hear me now? Yes.
Yes.
I love these questions because they're very inclusive. And again, I thank you for the opportunity. Now, I'd like to point out that the answers here are not exhaustive. They are an invitation for you to do some more research. But I want to just touch on something, if I may. Some of our listeners may be commercial tenants. So what I decided to do was to just let them know that in their agreement, they might find a default paragraph with a cure, which will allow them to be able to fix the situation before it goes totally overboard. But having said that, let me get back to the residential tenancy. It's a different act entirely. Every tenant tenancy is governed by the Residential Tenancies Act of Ontario. Now, to be sure that you're a tenant, you should not be sharing any of the living facilities with the owner. So if you live in a house, for example, and you share the kitchen or the bathroom, you're not covered by the act. So the first thing is, are you a tenant? Now, let's go a bit further with that. On the 20th of March this year, the L&T board, Landlord Tenant Board, suspended any action in regards to evictions, right? So that's to take one worry away from you. Now, if a landlord comes to you and says, I want you to leave, this is not the point that's important, because you don't have to leave with that. If it gives a notice for you to leave, you don't have to leave. You see, it has to be done by the tribunal. So a notice to leave does not mean you have to leave, first thing. So a landlord will give a notice in a tenancy, and that goes to the tribunal. and they decide whether or not you stay or you go. Now, seeing that the hearings are suspended at this period of time, there'll be no evictions that will be granted. And as such, the sheriff will not enforce them, right? So all Ontarians are covered by this. I'm not sure about other provinces, but right now I know Ontario has made this a situation where you cannot be evicted at this point. It says the landlord board suspends all eviction orders and makes all judgments stand still until things return to normal. Now, having said that, you have to also just not sit down and decide, well, I'm free. It is always a good idea to talk to your landlord about the situation. You know, let them understand that, look, especially if you're a good tenant, they don't want to see you go, and you shouldn't have to lose your nerves over the situation. So say, look, you know, Bill or Bob or John, you know how it is with COVID. What can we do to make the situation helpful? Because rent does not actually go away. It gets delayed. And what you don't want to have is when you get to the end of the road, you have a huge lump sum you have not decided how to handle. So you want to decide how to handle that rent when you can afford it. Now, look at the financing that you can get through the CERB. Again, with the idea of budgets, look back at what you've been spending during this period, or what since you've lost your job. Include your Tim Hortons visits, because they do add up. So I want you to understand that when it comes to this, it's not just a matter of the big ticket items, it's everything. It's everything. And if you could save $120 by curtailing your Tim Hortons visits, you may be able to help to pay something down, because you want to be able to manage your debt, and you also want to be able to manage the people who you owe. So that's what's important. Now, they're not having any hearings at the tribunal because, again, they're suspended. But it doesn't mean that they won't have them someday. What the tribunal does when you have a hearing or a meeting is not to evict you, but to see, particularly when it comes to an application for non-payment of rent, they look to see if there can be something can be done to fix the situation. If you were a tenant for 5 years and you have 1 6-month period going bad, they will help you. They will make an arrangement to say, well, they're going to make an arrangement to say you could pay over a period of time or by a certain date, or allow you to catch up. So don't get the worry that you're going to have to leave right away. If you were taking the chance to talk to your landlord up front, then what will happen is you can come up with a deal that you can work out. So during the period, you can catch up, cut back on your expenses. Now, the question does say you've lost your job. Again, that's what the CERB is supposed to help with. And it's geared towards 3 things: food, shelter, and clothing. So again, if you do have this money, make sure that after you've fed yourself, you look to see what else you have to pay, and maybe give your landlord something. Because if you have made payments in the period, even if they're not the full amount of rent, the board will say, hang on a second, to the landlord, you have to give them some more time because they're not truly delinquent tenants. So it's not a matter of the landlord walking and said you have to leave. That's not how it works. So again, you can check the website, which the landlord and tenant website, they will give you more answers to this question regarding removal of a tenant. It's not as easy as saying, well, they haven't paid. Other reasons may be more valid, but now remember that you have to be a tenant in good standing to take advantage of that situation. You can't decide that you haven't paid for 9 months and now you want to use this 3-month situation. Be conscientious. It is important. But more than anything else, just remember that you cannot be thrown out simply because you haven't paid rent. Now, the Landlord and Tenant Board has a website which you could get to, and also a media section which you get to on the website. It's what will happen. What you should do is also protect your credit by paying somebody something in case you have to move. You need to protect your credit. If you do have money and you're saying you can't pay rent, don't go shopping for a new car or a new refrigerator, because they're going to know that it's not right. So you have to understand that they do listen to evidence. Sometime in the future, they will start to convene more hearings. And if they do, things will return to normal. And they will consider your conduct during the period as to your entitlement to remain in the unit. So what you would like to do is to make sure you are conscientious. Speak to your landlord. You cannot be evicted at this particular point in time, unless it's an emergency, violence, for example. you'll stay until they convene again to decide what position you're in. So that's what you should be looking at, not worried about leaving at this time, but planning how to stay. That's a different approach. And eventually your landlord needs the rent, so he will get it. He has to maintain the property. He has to provide for the building. So he will get the rent. Just plan to be able to work with him that this can be looked after. Now remember, every tenant is covered by the same agreement in Ontario. So you're fine with that. Hopefully I've explained enough.
Thank you.
Very thorough. Thank you so much. Financial education for Raymond McDonald. The question reads, my income has significantly decreased and I am not earning enough money with the CERB alone. How can I pay and cope with my bills during this crisis?
Okay, thanks. And there's a mortgage question coming up, so I'll try and leave the mortgage specific stuff for a bit later, and we'll talk to more general expenses on this one. We all know the basics, right? You get rid of the unnecessary monthly expenses, because now hopefully you've done a cash flow. You know how things are going to play out over the next 3 or so months. And you're going to take a good look at what you really need and don't need to get rid of those unnecessary things. And I'm going to talk about a couple of small items, and then I'll come back to bigger items. So trim down the mobile plan. That's one of my first ones I always talk to people about. And you do this by phoning your phone company. You ask, if you've been with them for a little while, year and a half or so, you can ask for the retention team. Most people just don't do this. You can ask for the retention team and get a much better package on your phone, because you just discuss with them what you need. They'll come up with a custom package for you. Usually cuts the bill by about $10 a month every time you phone them. So I'll leave you with that. Get rid of the landline traditional telephone at your home if you don't need it. I don't know why people are still hanging on to this dinosaur technology. So if you have an alternative, right, that's the key one. You don't get rid of your phone if you don't have an alternative, but if you're carrying a couple of mobile phones in your house all the time, what do you have a house line for? And similar goes with internet service. I called my internet service. I've been with them for a while. I have the Cogeco 120 megabit plan. I called them up and I said I wanted the 1 gig service. So now they've boosted me up to 10 times the speed at 1 gig and $10 less a month than I was paying beforehand. And I was already paying pretty low. And all I did was I said to them, yeah, you're my second line. I also have Bell. So I'm thinking of, getting rid of your line. So next thing you know, you get it better. These are small things, but I got one more, which is to turn off home luxuries. That's a tough one for me. But people forget, in some homes, they may have heated floors. They may have a lot of lighting. They might have air conditioning at a certain extra cold level. All these things have to get adjusted in a time if you don't have cash flow. But just don't forget that you have certain automatic systems, all those little digital controllers, and you need to turn some of them off for a while if that's the necessary part. Even some folks I know have some older TVs which use a lot of electricity, and I just kind of mentioned to them, why don't you watch your stuff on a streaming device and stop turning on the big old plasma screens and stuff like that, because plasma screens really take down a lot of electricity. But getting back to the bigger stuff, we briefly mentioned suspend payments already. And of course, if you do that on a mortgage, you're still accumulating interest every month. So you have to remember that it is good when you need it to get cash flow right now. Again, talking about cash flow, getting through the next 90 to 120 days, everything we can do to do that. And so some folks may need to take advantage of suspending the mortgage payments, but I'm also going to apply that to other payments. You can call all these large companies. Don't do the automatic website stuff and pick the automatic button. Phone these people and talk to them in their call centers. It makes a big difference. They always have things they can do for you rather than taking the basics online. Now, as far as other places for cash, I just wanted to do that quickly. So you have to look at your cash sources, of course, savings, investments, any stuff, meaning sell something. This is a crisis, so touching the savings plans might be appropriate now. Finding other cash and cash equivalent services is also something that you have to get good at. We call that NGO assistance, right? Non-government agency assistance. The O is for organization. I always say agency. Anyways, this includes your local churches. Ask them for help. Food banks. I'm a member of in fundraising for United Way. So the United Way has a lot of services and community offerings. I don't know why people hesitate to go get help. When you're in a time of need, you go get help. It really does become a key asset is if you have a humble spirit, because some folks are going to ask you for some personal details. I wouldn't give a lot, but you do have to give something, because there's a lot of scammers as well. So you got to remember the people on the other side you're asking help from, when they ask you a question, it's not a time to get offended. It's a time to realize they have to decide who's in need and who's not in need in order to respond to those things. So just have a spirit of being willing to give some explanations. Doesn't mean you have to give a pile of detail, but you do have to give a little bit. I just know folks, I was one of them, who, when they start asking you questions, you get extremely offended. Like, hey, I just asked for your help. I'm not going to tell you my business. Unfortunately, it's part of getting help, is to tell them at least a little bit about your business. And we all know the usual, the family, friends, neighbors. Sometimes people are really too proud to go ask for help. This is not a situation that any of us got ourselves into. This is a situation that got forced upon us from, yes, the disease, but also in response to the disease, regulatory requirements. The law shut down a huge portion of our economy. So this is not something that we have to have some kind of embarrassment about. This is a time to stick together and make sure that we all help one another. So that's my brief answer that I'd have for cash flow problems.
All right, thank you very much. I rather enjoyed your explanation of things there. Very, very well done. Joseph, Mr. Richards, all right, you've unmuted. That means you're with us. So this question is for you, and it is an employment question. And this is the question: what should I do if I face discrimination at work due to COVID-19's country of origin?
Well, thank you very much, Pastor Rui. I hope everyone can hear me. I see some
Yes.
nods.
Yes.
I
You
see
can.
some nods. That's great. Very good question here. What to do faced with discrimination? I think first we should look at what we're talking about when we're talking about discrimination, right? So discrimination, loose definition, we're talking about some type of negative treatment, distinguishing treatment of an individual based on their membership in a certain group or category. And it can be membership that is perceived or actual. So it doesn't necessarily have to be true, the characterization. It could be simply a perception, but it still falls under that broad basket of discrimination. There are generally certain grounds that you can make valid discrimination claims under. For instance, under the Ontario Human Rights Code, they have a list of certain protected grounds. Those are reasons that we would say that discrimination would be unlawful, such as age or disability or ancestry. So definitely country of origin is one of them. It is a protected ground. It is something that you cannot discriminate against somebody based on their country of origin. So it's important to think about the type of conduct that we're talking about, right? Because discrimination comes in all sorts of different forms, so this is a very broad question because it really depends on the specific facts. One of the obvious questions is, am I talking about discrimination or is it not? Now understand, discrimination can be direct. So let's say a policy, and an employer would be, it'd be very unlikely that an employer would say, if you come from X country, you cannot work. But that would be a direct form of discrimination. Most often, and this is what makes these types of situations very difficult, is that you have indirect discrimination or adverse impact discrimination. So those are the subtle types of things. These can be comments or policies that are implemented in a certain way by the employer. So think about what type of discrimination that you're dealing with. Is it a single incident, or has it happened multiple times? It could be, it doesn't have to be something of physical harm or even financial harm. Loss of dignity can also be grouped into discrimination as well. So are you frequently the subject of jokes or inappropriate behavior that has happened at the workplace? So these are the types of things you want to be thinking about to try to kind of see which category are we talking about, what type of discrimination are we talking about, and whether this is something that you should take a step further. Now, what are the steps to take? Regardless of whether you actually take further steps, the question you want to be thinking about, and one of the basic things you want to be doing, is collecting the evidence. That means documenting, right? So you want to think about yourself, even if you don't plan on going to court anytime in the future, or to a tribunal anytime in the future, or any type of mediation in the future. You want to keep a good diary of what's happening: dates, times, locations, people who are there, who could be potential witnesses. I don't know about the people out there, but I know that memories can be fleeting at times. And, you know, sometimes I have trouble remembering what I did last week. So, you know, don't rely necessarily on your memory. Document the instances that have occurred, because who knows, you know, if you have 10 incidents that have happened and you can say dates, times, etc., then that means that you're very credible as a witness in whatever forum that you go to. Even if it's simply a conversation that you have with your employer, you will be very credible. You may be represented by a union, so you may want to have a conversation with union rep, or if not, your employer. And those are conversations that you can definitely have. The other thing is, you want to think about acting as soon as possible. One of the things might be, if you wait 6 months before you bring this issue up, and then they'll say, well, why didn't you bring it up, you know, 6 months ago when it first started? So there's a gradual way of highlighting these issues. It could simply be like, look, I noticed this conduct, I'm concerned about it, I'm documenting it, and you may just simply note it at that, and you just go from there, and then you start building up, obviously, your case to the point where an employer, for instance, or would have to at that point respond and take some more serious action. These are very difficult cases in general because, as I said, a lot of these cases end up being under indirect or adverse impact. They're very relational. And so it's so important to be respectful. If you're making these allegations, to try to be as respectful and cautious. Understand that these types of accusations, like so many other types of accusations, are very sensitive, and they can really fray the relationship of employee-employer or employee-employee if it's another employee. So understand that this can be very, very sensitive, and you want to think about what the consequences of making this allegation may be. And so I'm not saying that necessarily, and it's not your fault in no way, but this may be a sign that you may want to look for alternate employment. I know that's difficult, but in these types of situations, oftentimes you see a relationship breakdown that makes it untenable. We call it a poisoned work environment. So be aware of that. Be aware of that as well. So these are some of the process questions that you want to think about as you're going towards what your next steps are. Definitely consulting a legal professional would be advisable so that your particular situation, your particular facts of your situation can be discussed, would be also highly recommended.
All right, thank you.
All right. Now, switching gears gently towards mortgage. And if you're viewing today and you have concerns regarding your mortgage, the next question and the answer provided by Doug Goodman will be very beneficial. Doug Goodman, question reads, should I refinance my mortgage or defer my mortgage payments? What are the advantages or disadvantages of each? Which would you advise?
Mr. Goodman is not with us here on the panel.
Presently still not, okay.
No, it's still not.
Okay.
Unless one of the other panelists wants to field that question, you're welcome to, but if not, we'll have to go to the next question.
Maybe Derek Sloan might have a thought from a government standpoint in terms of any government info regarding mortgages, because I know that's a very important one to most viewers, because many persons are now on one income or no income and they have a mortgage. So Derek Sloan, if you have a thought you may want to share with us as we're pacing well with time, we could perhaps have you share a thought with us. And the question was, should I refinance my mortgage or defer mortgage payment? What are the advantages or disadvantages of each? Which would you recommend?
Well, I can tell you my advice as an individual. I don't think there's any, there isn't an advantage in relation to the government or a governmental program one way or the other. Personally, I guess what I would say is that if you need to do it, then do it. But I wouldn't recommend doing it just because you can, take a holiday for 6 months. Because, from a practical perspective, when you put off bills, there's no such thing as a free lunch, is the phrase. And when you put off paying these things, the mortgage is still accruing, and you're liable to spend that maybe on something else. So my personal recommendation would be to not do that unless you have to. But that's sort of the most conservative or safest advice to do it. So there may be others that would say, oh no, you should, your mortgage is low interest, so you should take that money and invest it somewhere else. Well, now is not really the time to be getting risky. Now is the time to stay on course and stay safe. So that's my personal advice on that matter.
Very good. And before you run away from us there, just circling back, because you did share a great info regarding the deadline was extended. I think you said June 1st. Question there for Doug Goodman, going back to round one question. The question for him was, can I defer my tax payment because of COVID-19? And are there any advantages or disadvantages of tax payment?
Yeah, so the deferral would be only until your June 1st deadline. And after that, you would be incurring the interest that accrues to late payments. So yeah, by all means, you might as well wait till June 1st to pay anything that you owe. There's no sense paying early. But I wouldn't delay it beyond that if you can afford not to. The interest that the CRA charges, I'm not sure what the interest is this year, but it's usually in the range, I believe, of around 5% or slightly below that. So it's not like a credit card, but I would recommend paying it if you can, to avoid the follow-up that the CRA will do. I mean, it's not the end of the world. If you can't afford, they'll call you and work out a plan. But if you can afford to do it, you ought to do so.
There's also for businesses a deferral of the HST installments that are usually made between March and June as well, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And another thought here is, are there COVID-19 related expenses that I can claim for tax purposes?
So was that directed at me or
You
somebody?
could go for it if you have a thought on it.
Well, so correct. I'll let any of the other panelists correct me if I'm wrong. But to my knowledge, the only thing that would be an additional expense would be you can write off some of your healthcare expenses if they reach a certain threshold. I believe it's 3% of your income.
Yes.
So there may be health related expenses that are because of COVID, but you know, hand sanitizer and masks and stuff like that are unless you're in the business. If you own a business and you need to buy them, they could be a business expense. But for a typical person, these types of things would not be a write-off.
Thank you so much. And these questions were not reserved for you, but you stepped up well and responded well. And thank you so very much, Pastor Rui.
Yes, thank you. Or if you don't have to pay any money back, you just do like I did. Take care of it in the first week of March, and I've been enjoying that money ever since.
Yeah, same here.
Thank you very much.
If I could throw in a quick tax tip.
Yes.
Yeah, so it doesn't help people right at the moment. You can only do it at the end of the year. But because a lot of us on this line are tithe and offering paying Christians, a lot of us get a fairly large, who are employed, get a fairly large refund at the end of the year. I just want to remind people, the government is not allowed to withhold more than what they're entitled to. So the government allows you, the CRA allows you around October timeframe, October, November, is to send them a letter to say, hey, look at my records. You know, for the last few years, I did X amount of donations every year, and I end up with X amount of a refund. And they will send you, for your employer, a code that will reduce your withholdings at source. That's the right word. And I really am surprised how many people don't do this. So you can greatly increase it's too late for this year, but you could greatly increase your cash flow by taking advantage of that. You just have to remember you're not going to get a refund, right? Or much of one, because you already kept all the cash throughout the year. But I just want to remind people who have cash flow issues and then they get a really big refund that it doesn't have to work that way.
So you could either retain it in the present or be refunded in the future.
Yeah, let's just say every month they hold $200 more from you than they should.
Okay.
You can write a letter about that. You have to do it every year. It only applies to the next year. So you have to do it every year. There's a deadline for it. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. I don't know if Russell remembers, but it's October or November. You write them a letter. They send you a letter back when they approve it. You give it to your payroll people, and you will have $200 more in that scenario. You will have $200 more every month for the next year.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Pastor Rui?
Yes, I guess some folks don't mind using the government of Canada as a savings account. And so
yeah, well, they don't pay any interest on it.
But they don't pay any interest. It's just for the goodness of your heart. All right. Okay, our last question for the second round is for Pastor Jerry. And it's kind of like a continued question from the previous one, and it has to do with, is digital or online giving safe and secure? And if that doesn't make me feel comfortable, what are my options?
Wow, another good question. In the Adventist Church parlance, when we talk about digital or online giving, we are obviously referring to the use of the Adventist giving site, which is available to all our churches. Many of our churches, if not all, are registered for Adventist giving. And so our members do find the link on the respective church websites, or they can upload the Adventist giving app, as we all know, using Google or App Store. They can even go straight to the Adventist giving site itself, right? And do this online or digital way of expressing their faithful financial stewardship with God. And it gives us a couple of advantages. I want to stress this out to all our friends and members who are watching and listening right now. Giving online allows us to give, of course, using an electronic check or with a credit or debit card. It allows us to create a gift schedule, which is very comfortable for many of us. And it allows us to view and print our giving record at any time. I mean, those are just some of the sample benefits of online giving. But mainly to the question, therefore, is online giving safe? Or we can say it this way: is Adventist, the use of Adventist giving site safe as my way of expressing my faithful financial stewardship to God? Adventist giving safeguards your information carefully using the latest industry standard security methods available. They use firewalls to block unauthorized access by individuals or networks, and use secure transmissions such as SSL or secure socket layer. I need to go through this, which is very important, I believe, to the one who asked and to the benefit of our listening audience, to encrypt information between the person giving and the Adventist giving. And as an additional safeguard, they also, in my knowledge, also encrypt all backup tapes. Adventist giving system has, above all, never been breached nor compromised from the time of its launching up to the current time. I think that's the most crucial one. But of course, we certainly appreciate, support, respect, and would even encourage our brothers and sisters to continue with their prepared method or way of expressing their faithful financial stewardship to God. But we say using Adventist giving is really, really safe. What are the other options, if ever? You can still write a check to those of you who prefer to do it that way. Writing a check, you can mail it to the conference, you can mail it to the church, or you can arrange for that check to be picked up with our leadership team in our churches, and even in the conference. Your pastors will help you on this. The treasury team in the local church, with the assistance and ministry of our elders and deacons who are faithfully dispatching their duties regarding this. You also have the option of what they call e-transfer, auto deposit. You can simply talk to your treasurer about it. We have issued some good memos and instructions so that they can be assisted in arranging these kinds of things directly with their banks. Of course, there are those, especially from many of our faithful seniors in the church, they prefer to express their love for God in giving cash, right? Cash for returning their tithe and offerings. We accept that. And at the same time, we want to follow the guidelines by the government, issued by the government, federal and provincial, so that we will be safe throughout this crisis. But all those things can be arranged with your local leadership, church leadership team, the pastors, like what I'm saying, the treasurers, the elders, the deacons team. And if you have further questions or any other preferred way of expressing your love for God in giving, give me a call in the Stewardship Ministries department of our conference, or give our treasury people in the conference a call, and we will be more than happy to assist you and pray with you. But thank you, our dear brothers and sisters, for your faithfulness to God, even during this crisis time. God bless you all.
Amen.
If I could just add, Jerry, before we go
ahead,
on.
Pastor Rui. Oh, go ahead. Okay.
Yeah, just
Oh,
give
go
me a
ahead.
second. So we are also working with the conference. So in the case of Hamilton Church, this week we will have it. You can also e-transfer now to the church email. So you have to talk to your treasurer and find out which email address, but you are able to make e-transfers as well now.
Yes,
Very good.
yes, very good.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Raymond. That was good addition. And thank you so much, Pastor Jerry. And as we transition to the third and final round, I just want to remind those viewers who are with us that they could still submit their questions through text or email or to Pastor Rui. And also, I believe there's some provisions there on the St. Catherine's Church website that we can have the viewers submit their questions. Transitioning now to the third round, just a disclaimer reminder. This forum is solely a platform to exchange of ideas and information on financial and other key issues relative to the COVID-19 pandemic. Information shared by the panelists are personal opinions and may not represent the official stand of the Seventh-day Adventist Church regarding financial matters. Listeners are advised to consult professional help relative to their particular case before making any financial decision. And some of those financial help might be obtained through a lawyer, accountant, investment counselor, or a mortgage specialist. Now, Pastor Rui, in the first question in the third and final round, did you want to take over that?
All right. Thank you, Pastor Chris. And before I ask the question to Derek, just reminding you, you can actually just use your chat to write your question in there, and we'll be able to see it. It pops up in there, and we'll see it, and then we can field it from there. So that is an easy way. So here's the question. The question is this: it's regarding to students, student loans. Are there government programs and assistance for students affected by COVID-19 by the pandemic? What about student loans? Can I defer paying my student loans? What are the advantages and disadvantages of a student deferral system? So it's question 1, A, B, C, and D.
Right. So as far as student loans go, they were automatically put into a 6-month interest-free moratorium. So you don't have to apply. And even if you don't want it, they're giving it to you anyways. So the student loans have already been put into a 6-month interest-free status. And that already started a couple of months ago. So you already will be seeing relief from that. As far as other benefits that are out there, there's what's called the Canada Emergency Student Benefit, and that will provide $1,250 per month for eligible students, or $1,750 per month for students with dependents or disabilities. And applications opened for this earlier this month, Friday, May 15th, and the fund will be available from May to August. There's also the Canada Student Service Grant, which will provide up to $5,000 towards fall education for students who volunteer and serve their communities during the pandemic. Then, of course, you can also look for a job. And lots of companies are now opening up. They're in need of work. And the Canada Summer Jobs Program is providing up to 100% wage subsidy for employers, and will create up to 70,000 jobs around the country for Canadian students. So I know in my riding, there's plenty of companies who are actually concerned that they're not going to be able to find enough employees because of the people who are already receiving the CERB. They're afraid that they're not going to want to leave that to come back and get a different type of work. So for students who are looking for work, there will be, even right now, there's many jobs that are available. So I would encourage looking for jobs. You may very well find something that gives you good experience and pays you more than what the student benefit is. So that should be your first choice, and you can look at some of these other programs as well if you're unable to find a job.
Awesome.
It's great.
And if you're still with us or just joining us, this is the online forum, Transitioning and Recalculating in Crisis. Today is Sunday, the 24th of May, and this session is in the third and final segment. Question now is for Elder Russell Preddy. We have an insurance-related question. The question reads, should I disclose my insurance provider if I was tested positive for COVID-19? Due to the impact of COVID-19 on my finances, should I cancel my insurance or not?
Thank you for the question. I want to answer it in the staid manner of Dr. McDonald. He's got this approach that I truly appreciate. Let me point out that insurance is not my main area of practice. I am more in civil procedures, but I have had the opportunity to work with insurance companies in these scenarios. Now, people have a love-hate relationship with their insurance company because it comes a time when you love them and a time when you hate them. That's the way they are. So the question here, I'm sure, is apt for somebody. But the question that was placed before me did not indicate whether we're talking about life insurance, business insurance, auto insurance, health insurance. So these are all different policies that you're asking about. Now, the thing about your insurance contract, it's an agreement. It's an agreement. And so let's say, for example, you're talking about health insurance. Your agreement might already require you to report a claim for treatment that's made to your underwriter. So they wouldn't need you to have to report it. It would be automatic if you are covered by, say, a private insurance company or for your health, that they may know the minute you apply for a test or in that situation. Now, the other thing to look to see is that does your policy require you to report something of this nature? See, now remember that pandemics, the last one was 1918. And your policy has evolved a lot since that, but they have not in many policies or in most policies, and I'm sure you may not be able to find one at all where they speak about pandemic relief. So at this point, there's probably no plans to act in any way, form negatively to your pandemic claim or your relief claim. So, and as an agreement, it cannot be retroactively changed to your detriment. So the one thing you want to look at if you're talking about your health insurance is what am I covered for, right? Am I required to report? Does my doctor automatically report? What does it say? So again, it's an agreement. So you have to abide by the parts of the agreement. For a policy to be rewritten by a company, it would be very difficult if your premiums are paid up to date. You're not renewing a policy. You bought it for a certain period of time. There's the agreement. There's the conditions of the agreement, and they should be maintained. And they would face some difficulty trying to change that or deny you a payout based on that. Now, the thing is, if they've asked you to disclose it, in writing after the pandemic, that might be problematic for them because it might be discriminatory. You see, because you've now attempted to change the terms of our agreement. So that might be problematic for them. So another thing you might want to look at is you might want to speak to someone whose practice is insurance claims, because they might have spent some time looking at precedent law to see what exists from 1918 to now that may in any way, shape or form affect your policy in terms of pandemic relief. So it's not straightforward that you have to report. If there's no requirement to report, you're not required to do so. Then I would suggest you follow the policy. The second thing is that if they try to change it, you may have some kind of difficulty. They might have difficulty trying to move ahead. Now, saying that, that's one thing, but also now that we've had this pandemic in place, they have made some adjustments to many policies or policies in a certain way. So if you had a life insurance policy in place and it was fully paid up to date and you passed away because of COVID, they have to pay out. It doesn't say in your policy that, well, there's an exemption if something happened in the future we don't know about. So if it's a life insurance policy, they have to pay out at the time or upon death, right? That's the agreement. Now, there are no COVID exclusions in any policies right now as they exist. Not saying they won't amend them in the future if they believe that this is something they may have to guard against in the future, but that would be in a future policy. It would not be in the policy that's written now. If a condition is triggered due to COVID, the critical illness insurance might come in first, as opposed to any other insurance. So they might have critical illness insurance, and that would also, by your policy, be covered till it's complete. They could change that after you recover and get your new policy, but they can't deny something you've already paid for, right? That's the difficulty. Now remember that I don't know your policy. I don't know the conditions or the covenants in your policy. So this is just merely for information. You still need to speak to someone who's probably your broker who may have sold it to you, or also a professional who has done work with insurance in the courts, right? So what they have done though is, for example, they might have, if you used to work far away from home and now you were working at home, there may be something that they will do to relieve you of your premiums on your car insurance, because your policy is sold on the fact that you travel a certain distance to work. If it is that for the next 4 months or so you're working at home, they have made provisions that you can have an allowance or some relief on your car insurance. So in that, I would ask you to call your broker or your insurance underwriter to say, look, where is my relief? I've been home for 4 months. Okay. Also, they may have for insurance business interruption policies. Now, again, those are more specific in what they cover than a personal policy. So there might be some that cover certain things, but many of them don't cover what they call acts of God. So, for example, they might decide that a flood was an act of God. See, they don't understand that Satan can do the same thing. So they defer to saying it's an act of God. And many people have been forced in the US to file cases against God. However, they have not been successful, but they have the right to file these cases. So again, they say these are acts of God, right? And so they will sometimes have an exclusion clause saying, well, if it's an act of God, we won't cover that. So you might want to look and see again in your policy what's triggered and what's covered. When it comes to commercial policies, they're more intense than a personal policy, although they do have all long pages of terms. They will have different allowances for persons than they do for businesses. So you want to look at each policy individually. A commercial policy may cover something to do with your loss of business sales, for example. But you have to look and see what's specific in the policy. There is some flexibility, as I said, with cars, because your coverage may have changed because you, rather than driving from Hamilton to Toronto, you're just sitting at home, and so your mileage is down. And they have prepared for that. What they have done is they prepared, the IBC Insurance Bureau has prepared an amount of $600 million to help you with those types of things. So call them and say, look, where's my part of that 600 million? You provided these things for relief and I want my share. So what will happen is they can reduce for a 90-day period at a time. So if this pandemic is, say, 4 months, then you're into 2 90-day sessions. So you want to apply to cover both of those if possible, because you want your part of those funds. There are other things that insurers have done. Some have made flexible payments on your premium. Some have made premium suspensions. Some have, because sometimes you cut your automatic withdrawal and you might incur an NSF fee. They have a way to deal with that, to say, look, we're going to put those back. We're not going to charge you those things. So you can vary your policy like you would in any other debt and say, look, call your broker and says, by the way, I'm working at home the next 3 months. Or you can say, my employer normally pays by direct deposit. I'm not sure the money will be there when you make a withdrawal, so I want to have coverage for those NSF funds I may incur. So you can get to things like that to help you not only manage your cost, but to look at how the insurance company will react. Now the question does say, should I cancel my policy? And there's something that's, I smile at that part of the question, because you bought the coverage for a specific reason. You bought the life insurance. Imagine canceling a life insurance policy just before you die, right? All the years of premiums would have gone. You wouldn't cancel your car insurance because you parked the car. You might reduce some of the coverage, but you want to have at least, for a loss of property on it. So you don't want to cancel the policy because there's a reason you bought that policy. You wouldn't want to cancel a health policy before you get sick. So you have to understand that with all these things, you don't want to cancel because you may lose what you've already paid years for. Think about it. What will I get? Why did I buy this policy? For an emergency. This is an emergency. I should employ my policy, not give it away. The insurance companies don't mind keeping your money. And they're not happy to pay sometimes. But in this time, they're saying, look, we have put aside $600 million for your benefit. It's up to you to say, let me have it. Just like when you call, your phone company and say, give me a different policy or a different plan. In the same way, you want to be able to call the insurance company and says, I understand there is a provision for this. Can I have the benefit, please? And that will be better than canceling the policy. Hope that covers the question.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I just want to quickly say this, Pastor Rui. I see now we're at 6:37, and the panelists have done a fantastic job in giving us a thorough understanding to the questions we've asked. So for the remaining panelists, as we seek to cover the questions, maybe we could limit the responses to about 3 minutes per response. And then if we have extra time at the end, we'll circle back for an extended response. So I think at this time, each panelist will have just about 3 minutes or slightly under to thoroughly respond to the questions we have, so that way we can trend properly to close at 7. And if we have extra time, then we'll circle back to you to give more info on each questions asked. Pastor Rui?
All right, good idea. We have 4 more questions, and this one here is to do with mortgage, and that is for Mr. McDonald. And the question is, COVID-19, of course, is ongoing, and my mortgage is up for renewal. Should I opt for a variable rate or with lower interest, or a fixed rate with a little bit higher interest?
Best timing would have been in March, late March. As soon as the government did its second, as soon as the bank did its second cut, that was the time to grab an interest rate. Okay, so I'll try. There's so many things to talk about in mortgages, but I'll try to stick to just the question, which is, do I do the variable rate or do I do fixed? So since about the early 90s, variable rate mortgages have saved people a lot of money. So many people went in fixed because interest rates are going to keep going up, and it's low right now. And then, of course, they would show some signs of going up, and then they'd come back down again. So folks who stayed on variable rate mortgages have come out on top for almost 20 years now, at least 17 years now. So the simple, quick, easy answer is to stay variable, because interest rates are pretty much rock bottom. I highly doubt North America is going to try the negative route that the Europeans did. So you're not going to see negative interest rates here. I doubt. That would mean we're having real catastrophic problems if we did that. So if interest rates are at 0 or slightly above 0, they're going to stay there a little while. So why not take advantage of whichever is the lowest rate? Because if you go back about a month, there was a short blip of time where 5-year rates were actually lower than variable rates at some institutions. So you really have to take every individual situation into account. But as a general rule, the 5-year rate is higher than the variable rate. And so it is a great advantage to stay on the variable rate. What I'm going to say is it's almost like stock investing, where people try to buy some stock on the way down or up, but really they want to time the bottom, right? Like back on February 13th, I sold all my Microsoft stock because I didn't like it up at $184. It went down to $145. I bought it around 160 on the way back up. And everybody says to me, oh, if only you had bought it at 145. You can't look at it like that. Okay. So it's the same with the mortgage thing. So sound advice is to stay on variable if that's your lower rate right now. When you see it starting to come up 1/2 to 3/4 of a point or more, then you take a fixed one. And someone's going to say to me, oh, but I fixed it a couple of years later at 0.5% more. Yeah, well, I just had 2 years of even lower interest rate. So in the end, you can't worry about every single individual moment. In the end, over my many years of having a mortgage, if you manage it well, you're going to get the lowest average over your mortgage. So the answer we try to focus on is variable today. If it starts going up, then you have a great opportunity to fix it, because usually they only do like a 3-month pay the interest rate penalty that they talk about on the variable, and it's not fixed, and then you're able to move it to a fixed with extremely little penalty. So you have to really spend time with people, talk to the bank people, make sure you get the right mortgage for you. Make sure if you're doing this approach, you take the variable, make sure what the penalty is to switch to a fixed when you want to switch to a fixed. But I would certainly push them right now to experiment with them to see what 10-year rate they would give you. So the answer I've given so far is mathematical. I need another minute to cover the non-mathematical part of this. Depending on your personality, some people can't handle wondering what their variable rate is every day, or if interest rates are going up right now, is it only coming up for a little bit and then it's going to come back down and I should leave it or should I fix it? And some people get really stressed out about this. So sometimes for some people, if the fixed rate isn't a whole lot more than your variable rate, and you're going to have great peace of mind because you know for 5 years or 10 years, this is what it's going to cost me every month. And according to how our incomes have been and how we hope they're going to be, this is easily handled by us. Then don't worry about maximizing your savings in that sense. Worry more about if you're the type of person that will have a much greater peace of mind taking a fixed one, then do it, because interest rates are very low. Even if you took a fixed, it's still really low. So if you are trying to manage to the pennies and you're going to stay active and on top of it, then you try the variable and move to fixed when the timing is right. If that's going to stress you out, don't do it. Take the fix from now, because peace and happiness is much more important than saving a few dollars. Okay.
Well said. And employment related question for Joseph Richards. Do employees have the right to refuse to work due to fear of potential exposure to COVID-19?
Well, thank you for the question. Very good question to ask, and it's a very broad question as well. I'll give the classic legal response. It really depends on the situation. When I hear something about, like, do you have the right to refuse? I'm going to interpret this question as saying, do you have the right to refuse to work without negative consequence due to fear of potential exposure? Because that's really what the question, I think, is asking, whether there will be negative consequence. And I think at that point, it really depends on the work environment, the work conditions, the type of job that you're dealing with, as well as what is the basis for this fear. Is it a hunch, a feeling? Is this because of actual things you have seen? Perhaps you've been working continuously throughout this crisis. You've noticed some things with the employer, this particular employer that you have, that would give cause to believe that you have a credible fear that there could be an outbreak at your place of employment in the future. Are you a vulnerable person? Are you caring for a vulnerable person? So these are the types of things to think about and to frame really the question and decide how you're going to approach it. Also keep in mind, I think this was mentioned perhaps before by Elder Preddy was talking about I wasn't listening fully because I was having trouble getting on, but I think there was a question about leave and the type of leave. Well, in Ontario, you have the infectious diseases emergency leave that was brought in by the Ontario government. That's retroactive to January 25th of this year. So you have the right to unpaid leave, so you can refuse to work even retroactively. You can assign certain days if you qualify under that emergency leave. So if you've been under treatment for COVID-19, if you've been under isolation order, if you've been directed by your employer, if you're providing care to a family member. So you have that access to that, and it's an unlimited amount of time that you can take for specific reasons related to COVID-19. So if it's just a generalized fear, that's one thing. If it's a specific or credible fear with a rational basis underneath it, then the simple answer may be to talk with your HR department, your employer, because at this time, I would say generally, I think the worst nightmare for employers is for them to have some type of outbreak. So that runs wildfire throughout the place of employment. So they want to likely or try to different ways to accommodate you, and maybe that's the direction of the question. Maybe it's not a black and white thing, work or not work, but maybe you want, in order for you to be in order for you to be comfortable, you want a more flexible arrangement. Maybe that's the issue. And I am sure that if you provide or propose a reasonable proposal, perhaps you don't have to work all the time at, for a full time at the place of employment. Maybe you can do some type of cycling of time at the place of employment. Again, if you're reasonable, if you're credible, if this is not just an excuse for you to, stay at home, but you have a plan, a proposal, now is the time when employers are probably going to be more receptive to accommodate those more creative solutions, because there are so many people dealing with so many different cases and situations in terms of their home and family life. So they want to, they are probably more likely to want to accommodate those types of situations. So look for those types of alternatives before thinking about simply saying I'm not going to work, or I'm refusing to work. So those are some strategies to think about, but ultimately it's a situation where you want to be engaging with your employer and working for some type of reasonable solution together that can be sustainable going forward.
Very well said. Thank you so much, Pastor Rui.
Well, I guess this will have to be the final question. This was a question for Mr. Goodman, but he's not on with us. So the final question actually belongs to you, and that is for Pastor Pasikatan. Would you like to ask that question? Question 6? I'll go ahead and do it. All right. Okay. All right. Due to the pandemic, money is tight. All right. Is it acceptable to give or use my tithes and offerings to help my relatives and family members to secure their food and other basic necessities?
Wow. Oh, that's an interesting question.
Yes, it is.
To the person, I want to thank the person who raised that question, and allow me to confidently say that God's word, the Bible, I fully believe teaches both. It teaches faithful returning of tithes and offering, no matter what the situation is, even in crisis. At the same time, the Bible also teaches that we should love and care for our family members, especially our parents, when they are in need. For the giving part, we probably know so well so many passages in the scripture, and so it does support, whether in crisis, good times, bad times, the Lord wants us to be faithful in our giving. Leviticus 27, Malachi chapter 3, Matthew 23, verse 23, Luke chapter 11, verse 42, name it, right? But to the second one, and to all the listeners and viewers out there, we also need to consider, for example, 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 8, that verse. Anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. I'll just leave another passage for your reference to all our viewers. Mark chapter 7, I believe verses 9 to 13, Jesus addressed the related issue when he touches on the topic or subject matter of Korban. But anyway, we fully believe in the scriptures. By God's grace, God wants us to secure both. This is where the wisdom being shared by our wonderful panel members here this afternoon comes in handy, along with some prayers and asking for God's grace and application of what our panel members have shared with us, their insights, their expertise on personal finance, family budgeting, faithful stewardship. I thank God for the one who asked the question, because it appears that the person had been blessed by God with finances, and he has something to return as a tithe and offering, compared to some individuals I get to talk to, members of our church, who say they really cannot give, not because they don't want to give, but because they really don't have anything to give. Anyway, by God's grace and through careful personal and family budget planning, we can, during this COVID-19 crisis, continue to be faithful in returning our tithes and free will offerings to God for the finishing of God's work, and at the same time, be able to lovingly fulfill our Christian responsibility of helping or assisting our family members who are in need. If we go over the experience of the New Testament church, say in Acts chapter 4, it appears that this was their experience. During crisis, they have done both. And so we praise the Lord for the good example of the New Testament church. May God bless you, to the person who asked this question and many others who probably are on the same footing or situation. May God bless us as we put a balance on the question and seek God's help, so we are able to secure both our giving to God, faithful giving to God, no matter what, and our giving to our family members in need. Thank you.
Very good. And there's a quick yes or no question that came in. Did the federal government extend the CERB till the end of August? I think Derek Sloan might be best able to answer that one. The CERB, was it extended till the end of August?
I believe it has been, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So I'd have to get back to you. But
Raymond might have an answer there. I see him nodding.
Yeah, so I agree with Derek. I can't remember if it was voted through, but it was put forward. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you so very much. Pastor
You can
Rui,
pretty much count on that, though.
who's in the other chat? Sorry, go ahead, Raymond.
No, I just said you could pretty much count that they're going to do that.
Okay. And Pastor Rui, I think a chat question came in. Did you want to work with that one?
Well, the question that came in, actually, I believe that you already asked it also. Hasn't the federal government extended the CERB to the end of August? So that question is answered. And up until now, this is the only question. I mean, one of our panelists has made a suggestion for a future topic. And so that is not exactly a question, but it is an interesting topic.
Very good.
Well, yes.
All right, so at this time, with just 6 minutes to spare, before I do the final closing thoughts, any panelists with any thought of encouragement to the viewers? Maybe you could take maybe 30 seconds to share a thought to those who have viewed today and those who will view, because we'll record and replay in churches. Each of you take about 30 seconds just to share your thoughts of encouragement to those who have viewed.
Well, I don't want the time to go to waste, so I'll take the first 30 seconds. I want to encourage everyone to, first of all, realize that because our God is so great, so wonderful, so good, this is not, for us, a calamity. We're watching what goes on, but he is so good and so loving and so careful. He's long-suffering and patient and kind, and he wants his children to see what's happening and also see the rescue that he provides. So if you're having a difficult time, remember that he is with you always. And he spoke to Balaam, even though Balaam was difficult to speak to. So he'll speak to you and keep your company. And, you know, God is great, and our members that I've spoken to have acknowledged that. So be sure that you know that he is great.
All right.
Fantastic.
And I'll follow up, I guess, just to keep it going. So I also believe that this is a challenging time, but I believe that for people who follow God and believe that all things work together for good, that calamities are also opportunities. And I read an interesting devotion this week based off of Genesis chapter 26, and I'll just share the thought with you. And I've read this chapter before, but I didn't see the connection until I saw this devotion. And so Genesis chapter 26 is about a famine being in the land in the time of Isaac. And Genesis 26 verse 1 says, "Now there was a famine in the land, and Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar." Now, if you go on to verse 12, it says, sorry, I'm in the middle of a thunderstorm here, so you may hear the thunder in the background. But if you go to verse 12, it says, "Isaac planted crops in that land, and the same year reaped 100-fold because the Lord blessed him. The man became rich, and his wealth continued to grow until he became very wealthy. He had so many flocks and herds and servants that the Philistines envied him. So what I want to say is, in the time of famine, Isaac wasn't afraid to sow. So don't be afraid to sow, whether it is into the church or whether it is into charity or helping out your relatives. And don't be afraid to sow into the opportunities in your life as well. Now is a reset time in the world. It's a reset time in Canada. But don't be afraid to plant those seeds and to spread out. I believe that for those who step out in faith, they will receive 100-fold what they put out. And I just want to say, don't be afraid, but plant your seeds in faith. And I know for a fact that God will come through for us.
That's excellent, Derek. Thanks. It is so important. I've seen some people, sit back and say, oh, what do we do now? I can't go out. And so many other people are being extremely creative in helping people around them. So I'll just encourage folks that this is a time to refresh church, meaning Love for God church, not physical building church, right? This is a time to refresh church to be more applicable to more people. It's not time to sit around and wait till we can all go back in the church 2 years from now when there's a vaccine, right?
Absolutely.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Joseph Richard, even at Hamilton Mountain, we still have the food bank open, right?
That was a food bank you said there, Raymond?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
The food bank's still operating, yeah, and quite a lineup.
Very good. Joseph Richards?
Yes, well, I'll just echo the messages that have been said already. These are very peculiar times, right? They're very strange times, and a lot of people are feeling anxiety, confused, or there's depression, etc. We need to cling to Jesus at this time. We need to draw closer to him, reconnect with him, and reconnect with loved ones. This is an interesting time where we have the technology available to us throughout the province of Ontario, throughout the world, to connect in very, very unique ways. And so let us make use of that, of what we do have, rather than focus on what we do not have. Focus on what we do have. And if we do that, we will realize we are still immensely blessed. We still have amazing opportunities to pursue God's work at this time, and let us dwell on those things.
Thank you very much. And Pastor Jerry?
Oh, yes. To all our brothers and sisters, friends, and all those who participated in today's online forum, this is our best time to claim and take God's word as it is. Like, for example, Nahum 1:7. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and he knows those who take refuge in him. Claim these words of God. God will see us through. God will see his people through, my dear friends. While we now experience one of those times when things seem shaky, let us all be absolutely confident in God's love, leading, and protection, that this good and awesome God we are serving is with us and be with us till this pandemic is over. God is bigger than coronavirus. He is in control, and God cares so much for each one of you. God bless you all.
Amen. And let us remember that the disclaimer for this says that this forum is solely a platform for the exchange of ideas and information on financial and other key issues relative to the COVID-19 pandemic. Information shared by the panelists are personal opinions and may not represent the official stand of the Seventh-day Adventist Church regarding financial matters. Listeners are advised to consult professional help relative to their particular case before taking any financial decision. Those professional help would come from a lawyer, an accountant, investment counselor, or a mortgage specialist. So I just want to thank the viewers, thank the panelists for your expertise. May God continue to bless you and your precious families, particularly Raymond, who is currently grieving. May God surround you with comfort and peace and
Amen.
give you the blessed hope that exists through Christ. He says, because I live, you will also live. And that is a powerful hope because he conquered the grave and he's returning, and dead in Christ will be brought back to life. And we who are alive and remain, so shall be with him forevermore. And in that kingdom, there's no more sadness, no more sickness, no more pain, no more suffering, no more crying, no more death, no more cemeteries, no more pestilence, no more COVID, no more anything that affects you, but everything that infects you with heat, with peace and joy, and that is Christ Jesus. So let me say a prayer as you depart. Oh, our Father God of heaven, thank you so much for this opportunity. I pray your blessings upon every single panelist for sacrificing 2 hours of their lives to be here, to sow into your kingdom. May you sow right back into their personal lives and their family lives. Everything that concerns them, make it become your concern as you bless them abundantly. Also want to ask a blessing upon Michael, who was contributed to the PA end of this program. May you bless him. May you also bless Pastor Rui, who is facilitated in the moderating of this service. And we're using his church platform. So may you bless him, his church members, his church community. Also bless this Southern Ontario region with all the pastors who work tirelessly to adjust and transition to recalculating through a time of crisis. May God continue to bless us, bless the governments, bless all those who work so hard outside the capacity of the church to keep this country and this planet going. May God bless us all. And this is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 All right. I'd like to thank everyone for participating, and all our panelists. You've done a great job. And I have one word for you. Wow. Wow. And all the butterflies in my stomach are gone. And now I'm ready to for the next time. And may God bless you and each one of our attendees. And remember that this has been recorded. And so please let others know who have not taken the opportunity to watch the program live, but they can go on through the church website and see it again on YouTube, and pass on that information and invite others to participate in watching it. So may God bless you and have a pleasant rest of afternoon. And we'll see you very soon again.
Thanks, folks. Really good.
Thank you, everyone. God bless you.
God bless you.
Take care, everyone. Bye.